Okay, so
Okay.
we have a couple questions for
Sure.
you about the disability service program.
Sure. So my name's Steve Bergen. I'm one of the counselors for disability services here at Nova. And so disability services support students that identify as having disabilities. So not every student with disabilities comes to us to get services. You have to then first disclose that you have a disability, and then you need accommodations to go along with that.
Okay.
Shall I start? Okay. Just to introduce, my name is Menna, and I have two questions for you. The first one would be, how many students at Nova uses the service?
It's a great question. So, we have a very huge population of students here, about 75,000 students between all our campuses. Disability services, we have about 7,000 students that use our services for all the campuses, and about 750-ish students that use the services here on this campus.
And
All right. So my next question would be, if a professor is not in compliance regarding the students' need accommodations, how is the situation resolved?
It's a great question. So one of the jobs that we have besides working with students is also providing staff with education as well. One of the big things is that we're not just providing accommodations, I guess, to help students out. We have to meet the requirements by law for the American Disability Act. So if we're not compliant, we then are in trouble because we could get sued essentially for not supplying reasonable accommodations to students. So one of the things that we do get into with instructors is they just sometimes don't understand how the accommodation will apply in classroom. So one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is just working with instructors and working out the issues so that they can then apply the accommodation in the class.
All right, thank you.
and I have a question for you. What can students do to help with this program?
So mainly the biggest thing is just making sure that students understand that we're here. A lot of students, especially our veteran population, just don't think that they can get services with us. And the reality of it is that we're here to support students, to give them those accommodations so they have access to buildings and access to the curriculum that they're learning. But beyond that, that's why we have counselors in these positions as well to help students through the process of learning how to use accommodations effectively and a lot of the other services that we offer here too. So it's more about just being educated about the process. One of the things we get a lot of times with instructors too, and going back to instructors, is that not understanding when giving somebody an accommodation that they look at it as unfair to the other students in the classroom when they don't really understand why we're giving that. So education is key. Being curious about it as a student, if you're not sure about a particular type of disability, coming into our office and asking questions, that's really something that's important as well. We have a lot of students on campus, again, that don't identify with us in our office, particularly students that use service animals. Have you ever seen dogs on campuses? So they don't actually have to identify with us as having a disability to bring their service animal on campus. But there's a lot of anxiety from other students and then from instructors because they don't understand what the process is with the service dog or how that plays in the classroom. So one of the things that we can do is sort of educate everybody about that process.
Yeah, you said how a lot of students don't know or aren't educated about this program.
Mm-hmm.
And our teacher said that you guys didn't have an office or like a specific person to talk to. So I was wondering, will the disability service expand in each campus or?
So the answer is yes. It has been expanding slowly depending on the population of each one of the campuses. I was a previous employee here, and I'm just recently returning in August. And one of the reasons why I'm returning in August was that this population here at this campus was growing. So we couldn't just service the students here with one counselor. We needed to have additional counselors on staff. So the answer is really we're expanding now, and so that's one of the other issues is that we're centralized. We're not assigned to each one of the campuses. So the brilliant thing is that if I'm not here on this campus, you can always go to the main campus, the main office for us, and then ask for help through the main office as well.
I have a couple of questions.
Mhm.
So what are the rights and obligations a student has with disabilities?
Sure. So they have the right through the ADA and the American Rehabilitation Act to get what we call reasonable accommodations. So it's about access. And if you want to compare it, I don't know if any of you are familiar from K to 12, you had maybe students that went to high school with you that had IEPs, individual education plans. It's a lot different than that, where that was really based on supplying students with tools to be successful. Here it's more about access to the material. Just like the same kinds of accommodations you would see on a job site, making sure that somebody has access to the right desk in a classroom if they have a physical disability, extra time on tests, for instance, if they have, say, a processing problem and they're not able to process a lot of information quickly. So there's all kinds of things that we can give them to kind of help them with the process as well.
Okay, and my other question is, what documents are students supposed to have
Yep.
in order to
So
receive this?
one of the things that we do have, and this is available on our website as well, this is the documentation guidelines for getting accommodations here at the college. And it really depends on the type of disability that a student has. If a student has, say, a learning disability or a psychiatric disability, then they're either getting a letter from their psychiatrist, sort of a narrative letter, or they're getting psychological testing that's going to give us information like IQ scores, how they process information, what kind of areas are they weak in, that cognitively that we need to help them by giving them accommodations for. So it's very structured in the sense of we need the documentation to establish the disability and then also figure out what kind of appropriate accommodations would go along with that. So if it's a physical, sometimes it's a little bit easier. A lot of it is by diagnosis, so that we give you the diagnosis and then like what we call functional limitations, how that affects that particular person within the academic environment. So.
And how are the services for students with disability at Nova campus different from other campuses?
It's
the Alexandra campus.
It's a great question because every campus is a little bit different. I think the biggest difference that comes to mind right now is that we have a partnership with the Academic Success Center here, and I think personally have one of the best tutoring centers, Academic Success Center, out of all the campuses. And we have access to academic coaches. So if we have a student, everybody familiar with like ADD, attention issues?
Yeah.
Let's say we have a student that comes in with attention issues that has issues with organization or following deadlines. The academic coach here is really helpful for them because we can get them linked into that service and keep them on track throughout the semester. So every campus is a little bit different. So if you went to Woodbridge, because it's really small, they're going to have a tutoring center, but they're not going to have those types of services that you would see on this campus. They're far apart, but the other thing is that students can come to this campus to use our tutoring center rather than using Woodbridge if they wanted to, but most students won't because of just proximity.
I have two questions.
Sure.
Time. The first question is how's the financial status of the service? I mean, like how much is it? How much is required for the financially to sustain the service?
To run everything just in general,
Yeah.
I probably would not be able to give you that exact number, but our staff is pretty big. So we have on this campus and on Annandale we have at least two counselors here, 3 counselors at Annandale, and at least 1 counselor at every other campus. That doesn't include the other services that we have. So we have interpreting services for people who identify as deaf and hard of hearing. We have closed caption services. So if a teacher is using, let's say, a YouTube video in class, it has to be closed captioned by law. And we have a whole service that just does that piece. So we have a main office that takes care of those kinds of things. So it's really hard to judge like how much we spend, but what I will say is that we probably won't ever run out of money because the requirement for the school is to meet the requirements of the ADA and giving accommodations so that we don't get in trouble, basically.
Last question is that there are some students who are who are dealing with severe and types of medical conditions.
Mhm.
How your service is able to handle with those kinds of issues.
So it depends on the actual impairment. What I look at is somebody would come into our office with an impairment, and then we have on the other side we have the classroom environment. So what we look at is how those clash, and when those come together, that's where the disability comes. It's not really a product of the person, and maybe not really a product of the environment. It's more that friction between the person, their impairment, and the environment. So it's really dependent on the person. I can give you an example. Like one of the diagnoses that we see a lot, and we're seeing a lot more of, is migraine disorders. And in that disorder, it's not every day that they're going to get a migraine, but when they have a migraine, it's debilitating and they can't get out of bed. So one of the things we look at for them is like reduce emphasis on attendance, for instance, the ability to extend the timelines for assignments, things like that, that come really handy for them, so they're able to get better, get well, and then turn around and work with the instructor to make up the work for that class.